Today's episode is brought to you by the IFS Institute. We're excited to invite you to the 2024 IFS Virtual Conference happening October 24th and 25th. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just curious about internal family systems, this event is for you. Join us online for 2 days of transformational learning, dynamic workshops, and insightful talks from leading voices in the fields of therapy, coaching, and beyond. It's the perfect opportunity to deepen your understanding, connect with a global community, and explore how IFS can enrich you both personally and professionally. Grab your tickets at the links in my bio to let them know that you heard about this on the One Inside. Welcome to Season 6 of the One Inside, an Internal Family Systems podcast. I'm Tammy Sollenberger, author of the One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about their inner world and who have a desire to connect to that authentic self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm super excited today to have Chris and Susan on the podcast. It's always fun to have more than one guest. It's just parts to make you really excited about that. So I'm going to actually ask both of you to introduce yourselves and then tell us all where you are in the world and what you see when you look out your nearest window.
Yes, so I'm Susan Bauerfeld. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, also level 2 IFS trained. Love IFS. It's almost all I do. It's a life practice now. I've got 3 boys, and I'm a speaker and a coach. And right now I am in Stamford, Connecticut, looking out at beautiful Long Island Sound.
And I am Chris Parrott. I'm a BPS Chartered Counseling Psychologist, which just means I'm a British psychologist. Did my training over there. I work here in the United States, though, as a life coach. And I'm also I'm a level 1 IFS. I'm really hoping to be level 2. I'm trying to get in that lottery. I'm a parent of 2 children, and I live here in Bedford, New York. And right now I'm just looking at my cul-de-sac with the beautiful fall leaves outside my window.
Right. It is really beautiful outside today, isn't it? And the two of you are working on a book together. So tell me about, first of all, the name of the book that I absolutely love and what's happening that you decided to write a book together.
So the title of the book is Get Your Shift Together, How to Help Kids More by Worrying Less. And Chris and I have been on quite a journey. We met several years ago and realized we were very like-minded in our passion for helping parents. And it initially was a book on managing media. But then we realized that a lot of the problems that parents were having were driven by anxiety and worry. And with this surge in anxiety among children, I'm a big believer that the best way to help children is to help the parents because they spend a lot more time with them than I could ever. And so we've evolved from there.
Love that. Get your shift together. So tell me, how about we do this? Chris, why don't you tell me what that means? Get your shift together.
Well, really, this is about where we place our attention. And when we're captivated by worry, which a lot of us are, when we're parenting, we're worried about a lot of different things that are happening for our kids. But when we shift our attention to worry, we go inward and we are inside thinking about our own thoughts, about our own feelings, about what's happening inside of us. And we actually call it the warp effect, where we become like racked with worry. That's the W. Angsty, right? That's the A. Reactive, and then also pooped, right? So we get warped by worry. So we've shifted our attention inward on what is happening for ourselves, rather than shifting our attention outward for what is happening in the moment for our kids. And that is really what we're trying to help parents do, is to make that shift from being warped with worry, being inside on what's happening for us, and being able to look outward as what can I do in this particular situation to help our kids cope with what's happening.
That's great. So I have someone that I dearly love in my life that is a worrier, and she really believes that she's loving people by worrying. And as you're saying that, I'm like, how many people, when you kind of say that worry is your shift inward, the worry is actually about you And I don't think that people that really have a lot of worry realize that. Like, I think that might be like offensive.
Well, I think there's a cultural message in this thing is like good parents worry, right? But there is a difference between worrying about your kids and being concerned about your kids. And I think that if you look at the dictionary definition, that worry is actually I think it's to torment oneself with
disturbing thoughts. Yes.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Where concern is really to have interest in something and there's some uncertainty that's happening there. And so when we have concern, it's right, it turns our attention towards what is happening. And then we can, the uncertainty tells us that we should probably pay attention to this and probably do something about it. But that is very different than the state of worry, which really now shifts our attention away from that of what's happening in the moment and inward on all of our fears.
Well, and I think IFS lends itself really well to address that concern you had about it feeling offensive, that when you're criticizing worry, you're saying that it's about you and not about the person. Well, the part really thinks it's about the other person. And the part often has quite a legitimate concern. But then the burdens that part has, which often don't relate to the person, begin to influence how the part responds and reacts. And all of that process then makes that part that's trying to be helpful and genuinely is concerned about that other person to do things which in the long run are not helpful. But the part doesn't know that. So where IFS is really helpful is, getting to appreciate that these parts really do have a valid concern, and to help them recognize that maybe the way they're going about this has some inadvertent side effects.
So what are you seeing when you even begin to name that worry is a part, right? If you name that with someone that you're working with, that, okay, so there's a part of you that's worried. I'm guessing that even is like a wait, what? Like, no, that's me. Like, I'm wondering if you find that that's hard to even name that for people or help them kind of unhook from that.
Yeah, it varies. It varies quite a lot, but skilled worriers, that's their parts that worry blend with them all the time. And parts that worry are good parts. There are no bad parts. They're really trying to help. And they get really a lot of encouragement from the culture that worrying is what you should do. So they get a lot of validation. They also get a lot of fuel for their worries from the culture. So the fact that they're worrying is understandable. And so some of what I find helps is when you can really befriend that part that's worrying. Sometimes even, if they pick a name for themselves and start calling them by name, then they're a little softer and a little more willing to consider, oh, okay, maybe there is another way to care about this person.
I remember hearing a long time ago, before IFS, that worry is like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you don't get anywhere.
That's great. Love that.
It's also a down payment on a future that may never happen, right? Like you're putting time and energy into something that really may never come to fruition. And that's the pea in the warp that we were talking about. It takes a lot of energy to worry, right? So we are churning over thoughts again and again in that focus. So it's really using up a lot of the resources that our system has in order to stay more present with our kids and use the resources to help our children to cope with situations. Worry really wants you to get rid of what's happening, right? Like the worry really wants certainty and comfort, get this to stop, make these uncomfortable feelings go away, versus life has a lot of stuff that's uncomfortable that, we need to be able to sit through. And so it requires a lot of energy to worry.
I want to put a bookmark on what you said about life is uncomfortable, because we want to talk about that with our kids. Kind of building, you don't think you guys say it this way, but kind of building tolerance for uncomfortableness.
Yeah, we will say, learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Do you find that people that have this skillful worry part, let's just say it's one part just for simplicity, like a skillful worry part, as a parent, that's really, their skillful worry part is in the driver's seat a lot, and they maybe don't even realize that. But that part is something that was helpful to them when they were younger. There's something about worry that created safety or created something for them. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I particularly see this in the ADHD world. I've done a lot of ADHD coaching and worked with a lot of parents of neurodivergent children. And worrying is very energizing. Okay? So it activates your fight or flight. It creates some adrenaline. And so if you have a sluggish brain, or if you are not sure what to do, that adrenaline rush can kind of push you there, kind of like anger. I know that after I have a part that, just displays a lot of anger, I'll often get a lot of things done around the house because of that, that energy rush that comes up. So there are places where it can be helpful. It's really helpful in getting your attention. And often, this is where we try to distinguish between normal anxiety and worry. Normal anxiety is helpful. That feeling of there's something here going on that I need to pay attention to. Important. Pay attention. That's super helpful. We would not survive without that. Okay, but what worry does is then it's thinking about that feeling and thinking, oh, this is an emergency, and thinking that intensifies that feeling. That's often what disorders anxiety, is that thinking. So, yes, often these things have gotten reinforced because they were helpful in certain situations. So that's part of befriending the part that worries, is acknowledging it makes sense that you do this, and I kind of get where that's coming from. And it was important to protect yourself as a child by worrying about things that mom and dad didn't worry about, let's say. That was super important. You had to pay attention to that. You had to be vigilant. And because you were so little, worrying really helped you to do that. Okay? But now you have other skills. Now your person has other skills and other resources. So, maybe we can find those and talk about those.
Yeah, I do. Same here. I just feel like we do have those younger parts in that it was very protective and very helpful when younger. But at this moment in time, we're really worried that worried thinking that Susan's talking about, it really does two things. It always turns up the temperature of the situation, and it always turns up the urgency of the situation. So it really ends up activating that fight, flight, or freeze response in our brains, which pulls us away, or shuts down, I should say, the pathways up into the upper areas of our brains, where really that's the access to that self energy, right? So when we're stuck in that worried thinking, we have less of an ability to connect with our self energy, to access that self energy, the patience, the curiosity, the compassion. So that was really helpful in any situation with parents.
Like, especially as a parent, those sound like a very helpful tools in your toolbox. So I love what you said about like worry became like fulfilling a need that your adults weren't giving you. Like that's really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I see that a lot in, parentified children. And a lot of us have moments, even if we're reasonably healthy, a lot of us have moments that produce burdens. and sometimes the worrying is comes from one of those burdens.
I like that phrase, reasonably healthy. I started laughing. I'm like, yeah, some days, maybe. Okay, so what about this idea of developing safety for children, and that safety and discomfort can exist at the same time? And so I use the word tolerance, like tolerance for discomfort for ourselves and helping that for our children too. I don't like discomfort at all. I just want to say that. I'm like, actually, I want to be comfortable and I want him to be comfortable, and I will just make whatever needs to happen.
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
And there's nothing wrong with comfort. Okay. Comfort is important. But when it becomes a need and when you don't have it, that becomes an emergency and dangerous. That's when we're in a problematic area.
Okay.
And culture, with some of the emphasis on safe spaces, which are important. Safe spaces are definitely important. We all need them. But if it becomes to the point where you can't function unless you're in a safe space, and by safe space, we mean free of any conflict or discomfort, if that becomes the rule that I can only function in that environment, you're not functioning, in my opinion. Because part of functioning is managing yourself when there's conflict, managing yourself when things are in conflict. And there is always conflict. Okay, even among, I use this example, it's a little trite, but, think of an elderly couple, married for 50 years, still in love with one another. One of them likes vanilla ice cream. One of them likes chocolate ice cream. They only have enough money for one scoop. Okay? It's conflict. And if they've made it through 50 years, they've figured out how to make those compromises and to tolerate the discomfort of maybe eating the ice cream they don't prefer. So even in situations that are wonderful, there's always things that are uncomfortable. Yet our culture says the only way, one of the messages our culture says is the only way to be okay is to never have any of those. And, in my opinion, that's a lie, because it's just not true.
Yeah, I think that for me is a big issue. Is I think culturally we're just sending a message like that we're supposed to be comfortable, and that if there's any discomfort, we want to take that away. And yet, it is the uncomfortable moments where growth takes place, right? And that's really important. That's where we stretch ourselves. That's where we grow. When there's resistance, that's what opens up the opportunity for growth. So when we, as parents, try to make sure and take away and eliminate all the discomfort, we're actually eliminating all the places of growth, right? Even just think of like a muscle. When we train a muscle, we give it resistance so that it breaks down and grows stronger. Right? If we have if we have no struggles in our childhood, if we have no struggles that we're up against, there's a lack of growth and a lack of, which is the skill building. And the skill building is the skills that you need in order to cope with the inevitable uncertainties and discomfort of life. No one can lead an anxious-free life. There's always going to be things that are uncomfortable. And I think I get very passionate about this. I think the greatest gift that you can give your kids is that message of, yes, this is hard and we're going to be able to get through it. We're going to be able to cope with it, and you will learn how to cope with life's difficulties and manage.
And this is one of the most beneficial aspects of self-energy, in my opinion, is being able to hold space for the struggle with discomfort and bear witness to it, and to bring some compassion and clarity, and to help children make sense of, with that clarity and compassion, make sense of what just happened here, and how are you going to move forward given that happened? You have choices. What are those choices? To be curious. Bringing self-energy to these moments of discomfort is really helpful in healing and growth promoting.
And I'm guessing, if I'm just thinking it really, and I know this is right, but I feel like it just starts with me when I am like, my parts are activated around my son being uncomfortable, or that I'm uncomfortable with him being uncomfortable. So it's like, so if I can unblend from the parts of me that are so uncomfortable with him being uncomfortable, then there's more self, there's more me, and then I can help him. But if I'm in like, oh my gosh, either like I'm just curious, like maybe you guys can speak to this, but like I'm like, what's happening for me, or what's happening for us as parents, that what parts of us are activated that I can't tolerate him being uncomfortable?
That's right. And this is a nice segue to our how-to, which we have 4 steps for managing worry, which is also generally 4 steps for regulation. It's also 4 steps for accessing self-energy. It's the same 4 steps, but you can use all kinds of different language to talk about it. So maybe we'll alternate. I'll say what the first step is. So, and is it okay, Tammy, if we use that as an example?
That's great. Yeah.
Okay, so your son's super uncomfortable and you get uncomfortable. So the first step is to notice, name, and normalize what's going on, both inside and then outside. Okay, so if we talk just about inside, you notice, name, and normalize. Oh, I've got a part that really doesn't like this. Okay, that part's feeling uncomfortable. That part's feeling distressed. That part's feeling, scared, whatever it might be. And just notice, name, and normalize that. And that's the beginning, the normalizing, the naming. When you name it, you tame it. Okay. It brings that intensity, that temperature down. It starts that process of bringing it down.
Yeah. And then, once that process is started, the step 2 is to really turn off the alarm that has happened in your mind. So when we notice, name, and normalize something, we start to move energy away from the lower part of our brain into the upper part of our brain, so that ability to access self-energy is more available. And so in that moment, then also asking the question, like, is sounding the alarm right now what needs to happen? Is the sounding of the alarm, is this a life-threatening emergency right now? And in 99% of the case times, that answer is going to be no. And so if it's not an imminent life-threatening emergency, such as like a car is barreling down and I need to run off the road, then having my alarms go off really isn't beneficial. So then it's being able to say, no, you know what? Having this alarm go off is disconnecting me from my self-energy. So can I turn that alarm off?
Yeah. And sometimes in that step, the part that's activated, it is an emergency. Where they're stuck, it might be. So some of it is, once you know your system well enough, is saying, oh, you feel like that thing is happening right now. And that's to be unblended enough to have enough self-energy to say, I know it feels like that, but right now this is not what's happening. I'm going to handle this. You can you can relax, you can step back. So, depending what's going on, you might need a little more time in that step if it's a very young part for whom this kind of situation was an emergency. And then the next step, which is part of what I'm talking about, is you deepen the reset. This is where you take a deep breath, where you do deep belly breathing, where you might do a mindfulness exercise. This is really to convince your system that it is not an emergency, that you're in charge with self-energy, that it's okay. And interestingly, often in anxiety management, they want you to start with that breath. They want you to start there. But if you haven't acknowledged the parts that are activated and help them to understand it's not an emergency, the breath is still going to be helpful, but not nearly as helpful as when you do it after.
Right. Yeah. And then, once you have reset, the last step is to take a step back towards the situation to figure out what is the next step for me to manage and cope with this situation. But really important in this step is when you step back, there is still going to be uncertainty. There is still going to be discomfort. So you're really not, when you reset, you're not looking for the state of nirvana and like anxiety free to be able to go back towards the situation. It's going to be uncertain. There's going to be some uncertainty there. But when we have more access, when we've been able to get our parts to settle a little bit, to connect with them, to let them know that we see them and be able to step back toward the situation with more self-energy, that means we have a little bit more clarity. We have a little bit more confidence, a little more creativity and perspective to say, okay, what does my child now need in this moment? You know, what can I do that will help this situation or help my child to cope with this situation?
And even beyond that, what actually is going on for him?
Right. Yeah.
Some curiosity to what's going on that he's uncomfortable. When your worry part just wants to take it away, you don't have the opportunity to discover that. And then once you discover that, you have a lot more information for how to help him cope.
That's beautiful. I just wrote all of that down because we're having a big slumber party here at my house tonight. And I'm like, I'm going to need all of these steps. I love that. I really love the idea of the third step is breathing. Like, that's great. Like the third step, because it's like, it's unblending. And then I love that turn off the alarm, because even asking the question, is this alarm necessary? Like, that's an unblending. And then I can turn towards the part of me that feels like you said, Susan, so beautifully, I can still turn towards the part and say, hey, buddy, like, we don't need the alarm. I know you might feel like you do, but do a little bit of updating, but you don't need the alarm. So it's sort of unblending, and then there's more self and there's more breathing. And that's just really beautiful. And then I love this last step of taking a step, but it's not a state of bliss, but sort of there's more of me here and my parts. This is the thing that Derek Scott told me this one time, and I'll never forget it. My parts love me, or they're protecting me. They don't love and protect my son, right? That my parts are trying to take care of me. And so 1, 2, 3 is taking care of my parts, taking care of me, and me taking care of my parts. And then 4 is me then turning towards my son in this situation with more self-energy and then taking care of him. Am I hearing that right? Okay.
Absolutely. And that's a beautifully said. Yeah, really.
Yay.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that turning towards your son with that self-energy allows you to remain connected to your child. And that connection, so incredibly important, because we don't have any control over our kids. We only have influence, and our greatest influence comes through how connected we are with our children.
I love it. Okay, so let's talk about connection, because because I think that I've noticed this, that if I feel disconnected from him for the slightest reason, my parts just shut me down and I'm just sort of numb and just out of here, right? I don't go to worry. I go to like, I'm not even here anymore. Bye-bye. So I think that the fourth step allows reconnection, because worry is also disconnecting. That's what I was thinking about is, okay.
That is the big thing. Worry disconnects us from our parts, right? From our own self-energy, and it disconnects us from our kids. And it is the greatest resource that our children have, is the connection that they have with us.
That's beautiful. Okay. So we think, like, by my special person that I love very much, who is a worrier and sort of drives me crazy with her worry, she thinks that worry is connecting. Is that right?
Yeah. Parts that worry often do. They really believe they're helping. And I've even heard parts that worry tell me, well, worrying is coping. That's how I cope. I worry.
Okay. Or worry's love. I'm your mom. I'm going to worry.
That's right. And so often, those parts are self-like. They're often very intellectualized. So I often join them there. And this is where explaining the difference between concern and worry, as Chris mentioned earlier, can often be helpful. That it's important to be concerned. And showing concern and, addressing concerns does show love. Absolutely true. And often what you're worrying about at its core is a legitimate concern. But the worrying takes you somewhere else. It takes you to what if, your person that you love very much might be saying, well, what if Tammy X, Y, Z, 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 and then comes to you to address Z, but you're still at B, there's your disconnect. So it is coming from a place of love. It is coming from a place of concern. It's just that the burdens and the thinking take you away from the current moment, and that's disconnecting.
What else do you want to say about connection? Because I was thinking about connection before we were meeting, so I knew that was important for you. And I was thinking about how I want to connect versus how my son wants to connect, and how the connection is different depending on his age. Like connecting with him at 13 is different than how I connected with him when he was little, but parts of me still want to connect with him like we did when he was little. So do you want to say something about that? Like, I'm just going to bring you all of my concerns and you're going to answer them for me.
At its core, I think that gets us into self-like parts versus self. And connectedness, true connectedness, the kind that's helpful, beneficial, and healing, comes from self-energy. And parts can bring that. Parts carry that. They have it. But if a part needs to connect or, thinks this is the way to connect, that's more parts-led than self-led. So some of it is in that deep understanding of the difference between self and parts. Both are helpful, both are necessary. Neither one's more important than the other. But when it comes to, connectedness as a healing and beneficial quality, that's self-energy. That's not part.
I love that. Yeah.
I think some of it is there. So there's really fascinating research from Harvard, long-term research on happiness, one of the longest longitudinal studies of people. And they've looked at all their health and wellness and, very robust research. And in a recent book on happiness, I heard one of the authors talking. You're saying that our material needs, that happiness depends on our need for safety, shelter, all of that being met well enough. So we can't really be healthy unless we're, those needs are met. We call those material resources. So money, education, housing, all of those. Super important, really contribute to happiness, but the contribution level's off. Once they're met, once you have enough to meet basic needs, their contribution level's off. But when they looked at the people who are really happy, have health and well-being, what's the factor that keeps contributing to their happiness? Connectedness. Okay. The single factor that kept on giving was connectedness. Okay. And so it doesn't level off. It just keeps on giving, and really contributes quite mightily to health and well-being long-term.
I can sort of think about parts that are like, if I just get those new cute blah, 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 or if I get that new car, or if I get this new da, 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 da. But those are sort of like happiness little hits, but they level off. I like that idea. Like they level off. I do get a little hit, but then the part needs more.
Yeah. And some of the way we've tried to capture this in parts language is that the material resources convey, we're invested in you. We're invested in this relationship. But what the non-material, the self-energy qualities communicate is you matter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You matter to us. So investing in someone, yeah, does that communicate that you matter? Sure. But it only goes so far. But the big hit of mattering comes from the connectedness and all the other C qualities.
Wow. And I think that makes so much sense that if somebody was like, what do you want to do today? Right? Like if I said to my son, what do you want to do? Let's do the thing that you want to do, that you matter. Your opinions matter, your needs matter, versus let's just do all the things that I want to do. Or sort of, it doesn't have to go both ways though, right? Like I don't just always do the things that he wants to do.
Absolutely. There's a meeting in the middle somewhere there, because if you're always doing what you want to do, then there is his younger self gets that message that his needs don't matter. But at the same time, if you're always giving into whatever he wants to do, then he's learning, well, you don't matter and your needs, there's no balance in between. So both of them are important, right?
And it doesn't create like discomfort for him, to go back to that, right? Discomfort for like, okay, well, he has to tolerate or build some skills around doing something that is a little bit more uncomfortable for him. Okay.
Right. And again, much easier for children to learn when they've been acknowledged first, that first step. So I hear that you really want another thing of cotton candy. You really want it, and you think it would be the best thing ever. Wouldn't it be great if you could eat as much cotton candy as you wanted? There's your acknowledgement, borrowing a little bit from Faber and Maslow, my favorite parenting authors, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. So giving in fantasy what you can't give in reality, it shows, I hear you, I get it. It makes sense to me. But I'm confident, this comes from Eli Leibovitz at Yale, I'm confident you can cope with this better than you think.
Yeah. I really think that being able to validate what is happening for your children and being able to start with that is so very important, so that they get the message that you see them, right? And they matter. And also one of the things that as a parent, that you're helping them to build their abilities of self-regulation. Part of building that ability is for them to make sense and organize the feelings that they're having. So when we in Susan's example, turn outward and say, yeah, it would be really nice to have that. It sounds like, and it's hard sometimes to not get what you want in the moment, right? That's helping them to organize and make sense of the feelings that are happening in there. And like, yeah, that's really frustrating, isn't it? Now they're starting to understand what frustration is. So that's the beginning steps of helping them to regulate their emotions, for them to be able to shift and manage their emotions.
Yeah. And it's not magic.
No.
So, they may still have the meltdown about not having the cotton candy. That doesn't mean you fail, but it may be shorter, and they may be more open to your connectedness and your comfort. It's a process. It's, I often talk with my clients about building a ramp instead of demanding a rocket ship, that it's a step on the way.
Yeah. And I think what we always say is it may not be easy in the moment, but hopefully it's slightly easier to reconnect, to keep that connection, right? The moments may not be easy, but when you have that connection and your kids still feel welcomed and feel safe, then it's slightly easier to manage what is happening.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking that, like, if my kid had a fit, and then if I then just said, here, have the cotton candy, then I disconnect. Like, I would just be like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm just, that would cause me to disconnect.
Yeah, it's like hands in the air, I give up.
Yeah. And fine, here, have whatever you want.
Right. And that can be really frightening to parents. In ways that we don't intend or even know or notice.
Yeah. Before we go, do you want to talk a little bit about the importance of speaking for our parts, or helping our kids speak for parts?
Sure. I think what Chris was saying on the heels of that, part of that regulation process and supporting regulation is as we can speak more for our part, that teach children to speak more for their parts. Like allowing for, I have a part that's really angry right now. Helps with the unblending, helps with the regulation. And if you can meet that part with self energy, you begin to reinforce that speaking for a part turns out well. So whereas if you meet a part with a part, which we often do, shit so many times raising my voice, especially I use this example over taking out the garbage. Like, you don't have any chores, the garbage is still full. I would go completely ballistic. I had a part that would just bring up all of its burdens and spout them off as if the kids were responsible for taking care of all of that. And they would look at me dumbfounded and the garbage would still be full. So learning how to even just identify that's a part, I think is super helpful to children and begins that process of beginning to advocate for yourself by speaking for parts and owning when we are speaking from a part, oh, that was that part of me that, just was feeling badly. And I want to apologize on behalf of that part because that part was dumping a lot on you that didn't belong to you.
Yeah, with a lot of my clients, it's not, even if they're not really knowledgeable in the IFS, just beginning to use that language, like, oh, that was a part of me that just got so angry, or there's a part of me that just really wants you to be able to do X, Y, or Z. Like just being able to use that parts language is super helpful because then it's not all of us, right? It's not character flaw. It's just it's a part of me that's showing up. And that I think really helps with part of that connection is how welcomed and safe you feel, right? So if you can just make it so it's not all of you, there's this part, and we recognize the positive intentions, it becomes easier for it's more likely that our children feel more accepted, more welcomed, safe within the environment at home.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to Chris, I think like a one-word sentence answer would be that first notice, name, and normalize is the process of beginning to speak for a part. Okay. Because by noticing, naming, and normalizing, you are beginning to unblend, and you're also giving voice to what that part is holding.
Yeah, so good. So good. Helpful for us, our internal system, and help for connection inward and connection outward with our children. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. I took so much notes and so many notes and so much from this conversation. So thank you so much. Do you want to say anything else? Anything about your book coming out or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping it's coming out sooner or later. We don't have a date yet, but it will be on our websites and, we'll create some social media buzz around it.
But I did want to say thank you so much for having us. I mean,
yeah,
it's
always great to talk IFS.
Yeah.
I just,
really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for coming on. So can I ask my last question? And so, Chris, we can start with you. So if you had to do something different in your life for yourself, for your career, what would you do instead of what you're doing now?
That is so hard. I have so many because I'm so deeply happy with what I do. I so love, it's very hard for me to imagine not doing this because I just don't feel like I love to play soccer. This is so I'm just going in this, that is a passion of mine. I just don't think I would feel as fulfilled playing soccer all the time as what I'm doing now. So my parts go, whatever it is, it would have to be something that's helpful to other people. I just don't know. I don't know how to define that. So, I mean, I could be like, oh, I'd want to have the best soccer skills on the planet. My parts then go, yeah, but at the back of you that wouldn't feel really fulfilling as much as what you're doing.
So I love that word, fulfilling. That's great. You're like, I want to do something fulfilling.
Answer for you, because I think I'm supposed to be really imaginative and be like, I'm going to be the greatest soccer player in the world, or there's something about connecting with and being with other people, and it's really something that's beautiful for me. So I don't know what that would look like, but
that's good.
Well, I'm grateful Chris got to go first, because I had a lot of parts who feel the same way she does, but it also gave other parts time to think. So, I would love to sing on Broadway. That's if I cannot, I don't sing well. My son says he could teach me, but not to. But I would love to bring that kind of communication to people. So.
I love it. Both things that would be very fulfilling. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. And yeah, I actually didn't say that you both are speaking at the IFS annual conference, which is next week. So I'm excited too. It's going to be great. It's going to be great to see everybody and just have some good community time. So thank you both. I have parts
that really wish it was in person, but
I know, me too.
I'm going to take what we get that. Yeah.
So. Next year. Yeah. Thank you both so much. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you left a rating, a review, a like, comment, share with your family, your friends. That would mean so much to me. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or on Amazon. You can visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, or you can download a free Get to Know a Should part of you. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and at The One Inside on Facebook and on YouTube. Jeff Schrum co-produces The One Inside, and I am forever grateful for Jeff. Also thankful for Jack Rudin for creating the music, and just thank you for listening. 6 seasons, over 1 million downloads. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you in this community. I'll see you next time.